When we talk about the shadow, we almost always imagine the same things. The rage we hide, the envy we deny, the cruelty we would never admit to. And all of that is real. But Carl Jung discovered something far stranger and far sadder about what we bury inside ourselves. It is not only our darkness that we exile, it is also our light. Some of the very best parts of you, your boldness, your brilliance, your power, your capacity for joy, are very often hidden in the shadow too, locked away just as completely as the worst. Jung called this the golden shadow, and it points to a quiet tragedy that runs through most human lives. We do not only fear the monster within, we also fear the magnificence. In the next few minutes, I want to show you why we hide our best qualities, how to find the gold you buried long ago, what it costs you to leave it there, and what it takes to finally bring it back into the light. Because the part of you that you are most afraid of might be the part you were meant to become. Let's start by correcting the most common misunderstanding about the shadow. We tend to think of it as a kind of inner dungeon, holding only the ugly things, the shameful impulses, the pettiness, the parts we are right to keep hidden. But that is only half the picture. Remember what the shadow actually is. It is everything about yourself that did not fit the image you needed to present to the world. Everything you pushed out of sight in order to be accepted. And here is the crucial point. The things that don't fit are not always bad. Sometimes the trait you had to bury was a strength. A child who is naturally loud and expressive, full of life, is told again and again to settle down, to stop showing off, to stop being too much. So that exuberance, a genuinely good quality, gets pushed into the dark right alongside the anger and the fear. A child who is gifted, who learns quickly and shines easily, senses that this makes others uncomfortable and quietly learns to dim themselves. Their brilliance becomes something to hide. The same thing happens with tenderness in a boy taught that softness is weakness, with ambition in a girl taught above all to be agreeable, with a strong, clear voice in a household where it was safer to stay quiet. In every case, a real strength gets filed away as a liability, not because it was one, but because the people around the child could not hold it. This is the golden shadow, the disowned good, the talent, the confidence, the ambition, the creativity, the sheer aliveness that we exiled. Not because it was wrong, but because at some point it was unwelcome. Why this matters for you right now? When you do your shadow work, you are not only looking for the worst in yourself, you are also searching for the gold you were taught long ago to leave behind. But this raises an obvious question. Why on earth would anyone bury their own best qualities? It sounds absurd, and yet almost all of us do it. The answer is that for a child, standing out can feel genuinely dangerous. To be brilliant, bold, or powerful is to be visible, and visibility invites envy, resentment, expectation, and sometimes punishment. So we learn very early that it is safer to be small. We absorb 100 quiet messages. Don't brag. Don't get too big for your boots. Who do you think you are? Each one teaches the same lesson, that our natural fire makes other people uncomfortable, and that dimming it is the price of belonging. And it works. Dimming yourself really does buy a kind of safety, a kind of acceptance. That is exactly why it is so hard to undo. It was once a genuinely intelligent solution to a real problem. The tragedy is only that we keep paying that childhood price for decades after the danger that demanded it has long since passed. And there is a deeper layer still. Owning your own greatness comes with a terrifying weight. If you admit that you are genuinely capable, genuinely gifted, then you become responsible for using it. You can no longer hide behind, "I'm just not the kind of person who could do that." It is strangely far more comfortable to believe you are small than to face the demand of your own potential. Consider the person who consistently downplays their talent, who deflects every compliment, who sabotages the opportunity right before it arrives. From the outside, it looks like low confidence, but underneath, it is often a golden shadow at work, a self so unaccustomed to claiming its own light that success itself feels like a kind of danger. Why this matters now, the modesty you wear like a virtue may sometimes be a cage you built to feel safe. So if you have buried some of your best qualities, how would you ever find them again? Jung gave us a beautifully simple clue, and it works exactly like the projection we explored before, only in reverse. We said that the traits you hate in others are often your own disowned darkness. Well, the same mechanism carries your gold. The qualities you most admire in other people, the ones that fill you with a kind of aching, wistful longing, are very often your own unlived potential, projected outward onto someone who is living it for you. Pay attention to a particular feeling. Not ordinary respect, but that pang you feel watching someone be boldly, unapologetically themselves, and the quiet thought that follows, "I could never be like that." That sentence is the signpost. The very fact that it moves you so deeply is the clue that this quality already lives in you, buried, recognizing itself in another. We are not moved by what is alien to us. We are moved by what is ours and unlived. Think of the shy person who idolizes a performer, who watches them with their whole heart, certain they themselves could never do such a thing. Very often, hidden in that admiration is their own exiled expressiveness, longing to come home. Or think of the person who cannot stop criticizing the arrogance of someone who simply backs themselves, who states their own worth plainly and asks, without apology, for what they want. Sometimes that is ordinary projection of the dark, but just as often it is envy of a freedom they will not grant themselves. The freedom to take up space without first asking permission. Why this matters now. The next time you find yourself thinking, "I wish I could be like that," stop. Because you may be looking directly at a piece of yourself you abandoned. Now we have to be honest about what it costs to leave the gold in the dark, because this is not a small or harmless loss. Jung had a powerful phrase for the consequence. He wrote of the unlived life, and he understood it as one of the most corrosive forces in the human soul. When you refuse your own potential, that energy does not simply disappear. It curdles. It turns into a vague, persistent dissatisfaction, a restlessness you can never quite name, a sense that your real life is happening somewhere just out of reach. You watch other people do the things you secretly long to do, and you call it being realistic, or humble, or content, when really it is grief. The grief of a self that was never allowed to fully arrive. Jung went further and noted how this gets passed down. He wrote that nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on children than the unlived life of the parent. The dreams you abandon do not stay neatly inside you. Your children feel the shape of the space where your aliveness should have been, and often spend their own lives trying to fill it. You can see it too in the sudden, disproportionate bitterness some people feel toward the young, or toward anyone chasing a dream out loud. Underneath that bitterness is almost always a dream of their own, quietly buried long ago, and never quite forgiven. Consider the person who arrives at 50 and realizes, with a quiet shock, that they spent their whole life being careful, being small, being safe, and that the boldness they always admired in others was a door they were simply too afraid to walk through. Why this matters now: the safe, small life is not actually safe. It only trades one kind of risk for a slower, quieter loss. So how do you begin to bring the gold back? The first thing to understand is that reclaiming your light is, strangely, just as frightening as facing your darkness, because it is still exiled material, and the psyche guards both with the same fear. To step into your own power, your own visibility, can feel as exposing and as shameful as admitting your worst traits. Expect that. The discomfort is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are touching something real. Then you begin, as always, small. You let yourself want the thing you have always told yourself you could never have. You take the admiration you feel for someone else, and you ask the braver question, not, "Isn't she amazing?" but, "What is it in me that recognizes this?" And then you take one small action in its direction. If you secretly long to create, you make one imperfect thing. If you long to be seen, you let yourself be seen, just slightly more than is comfortable. If you long to lead, you take responsibility for one small thing instead of shrinking from it. You are not trying to become someone else. You are reclaiming what was always yours, one cautious step at a time. And it helps to expect the old voices to return, the ones that said, "Don't get too big. Who do you think you are?" They will rise the very moment you reach for something. Do not argue with them. Simply notice that they are old, borrowed, and no longer in charge. The aim is not to feel confident before you act. It is to act gently while the fear is still there, until the gift slowly stops feeling stolen and starts feeling like yours. Why this matters now: you do not have to earn the right to your own gifts. You only have to stop refusing them. So imagine, over time, gathering these abandoned parts of yourself back home. What changes? First, the chronic, low-grade restlessness begins to ease. So much of our daily dissatisfaction is the pressure of unlived potential pushing quietly against the walls we built. Let it live, and that pressure transforms into energy, direction, aliveness. Second, you stop projecting your gold onto others. You no longer need to worship people from a distance because you are busy becoming, in your own way, what you once only admired. Impressive people become inspiration, rather than evidence of your own smallness. You may also notice that people begin to respond to you differently, not because you have become louder or more demanding, but because something in you has quietly stopped apologizing for existing. The energy you once spent on shrinking is simply available now, and others can feel it, even if they could never name it. And third, you become simply more yourself. This is what Jung meant by wholeness, not just integrating your darkness, but reclaiming your light until the full range of who you are is finally available to you. A whole person is not only someone who has faced their capacity for harm, it is someone who has dared to claim their capacity for greatness. And here is the quiet truth at the center of all of this. The world does not actually need you small. It needs whatever it was you buried, the gift, the boldness, the voice you decided long ago was too much. Why this matters now? Somewhere inside you is a version of your life you have never let yourself live. It is not too late to meet it. So here is your question for tonight. Think of the person you most admire. Not respect from a distance, but admire with that quiet ache that I could never be like that. And then ask the question that changes everything. What does that admiration reveal about the gold I buried in myself? Whatever rises up in answer, that is your golden shadow, calling you home. Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this met you where you actually live, subscribe and stay close. In the next video, we bring the whole shadow together, the dark and the gold, and look at what it actually takes to do the real work of integration. Not the version you've seen turned into a hashtag, but the demanding, lifelong work Jung actually meant. Until then, stop dimming the part of you that was always meant to shine.